talkradio.nyc.
Morning. Your boy is back in the attic. The one and only nonprofit sector connector. Little scratchy voice. I don't know. Maybe two Met games, one on Tuesday night with the Queens Chamber of Commerce, one on Wednesday afternoon with a handful of nonprofit executive leaders and Jovia Federal Credit Union, Jovia Financial Credit Union. Yesterday, a golf outing for cerebral palsy in Nassau County, followed up by an event, a social event for our new venture, Philanthropy Network in New York. Your boy's busy. That's what a nonprofit sector connector is doing out there in the world, in the game, in the arena, like Teddy Roosevelt's poem. Maybe we'll read that poem later on, but in the arena, making it happen, making the relationships, making the connections. And I'll tell you something. First of all, let me say good morning to my guest, Yoon. Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Tommy?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm doing really, really great. I got to just kind of set some context of how we connected. So gang, here's what I got to teach you about life. This show is all about helping nonprofits, as I like to say, tell their story and amplify their message. And, you got to put yourself in certain opportunities. You got to put yourself in the driver's seat of finding relationships, making new relationships, building relationships, right? I talk about a lot of things I'm going to be talking about going forward is really identifying, nurturing, and elevating relationships. It's kind of a peek into some of the stuff we're going to get into, in the next few months. But so here's what I want to say. Maybe 6 weeks ago, I was preparing to go to Citi Field where the New York Mets play for the Queens Chamber of Commerce Business Expo. And I typically go to this event, Young, and I don't always buy the ticket to the lunch. But because I go to the event, I walk the trade show room, I feel like I don't want to lose 90 minutes sitting at a lunch, right? This particular lunch was recognizing and honoring women in AI, in artificial intelligence, because Queens County of New York City is really becoming is a tech hub, but is becoming even more of a tech hub. With some relationships with guys like Frank Cassell, who runs the technology council at the Queens Chamber. There's a lot of stories. Frank's going to come on the show, so we'll get into that at some point. But I just set the context there, gang, because I did purchase a ticket for the lunch that day. And I went to the lunch and I met some of the women who were on the panel discussion. And then later throughout the trade show, we took some pictures together and things like that. And one woman named Michelle reached out to me, says, Tommy, actually, we're at the event. She said, listen, we should really talk because I know a lot of people in the nonprofit world. She used the term NGO, which is what we call non-governmental organizations, correct me if I'm wrong, right? But that's what they call nonprofits on the international stage. And that's, Soon Young, how we got together. Michelle, and it's funny how we are here, at least in New York, people were saying her name is Michela. And I heard her say, well, my name's really Michelle. And I listened for that. So that's why I'm very specific, because people's names are important. And when I introduce myself as Tommy D and someone puts their hand out and says, nice to meet you, Tom, I go, it's not my name, man. I'm Tommy D, right? So I think it's incredibly important that we're cognizant of that. So Michelle made this connection to you, and who knows where this is going to go, because, as a representative of the International Alliance of Women to the UN, man, I'm playing in the big leagues now, Soon Young. I'm playing in the big leagues. So we're going to talk about your story, your connection to the UN, the work you're doing. And really, as I said to you yesterday, from the golf course when we had our call, I didn't play well. If you were curious, I did not play well, but I had a great time.
Doesn't matter. It was for charity, right?
It's for charity. It's a great organization. It's cerebral palsy of Nassau County. My business partner is on the board there. Our agency actually handles the employee benefits for cerebral palsy of Nassau County, so we're very connected to that organization. And I certainly had a great time at the event. Although I'll tell you this, it rained twice, and every time it rained, it was hotter out than before it rained. So I said, this isn't good. Stop raining, man. It's getting worse out here. But
But you were cooler. You were cooler because you were wet. So
I'm pretty cool. And I'm pretty cool to begin with. But I had like a Hawaiian shirt on, so and I wear the purple golf pants, the knickers, and I bring them all the way up to my knees. I got the long Argyle socks. It's a photo op, gang. You should see it. So anyway, so Soon Young, I want to get into your story. I want you to just kind of take me back. I know you had said, Tommy, I'm going to kind of flip it on you and ask you questions. I promise I'll let you do that. But really,
yeah.
this is about you, what you're doing in the world, the people you're meeting, the impact. And, hopefully by us connecting today, maybe I can drive some relationships of value in your direction, and we can just
Love
kind of
that.
together make
Love
the
it.
world a better place. So I always like to start the show by saying, my guest is here to talk about themselves, their connection as it is to the nonprofit sector, the work they're doing. Soon Young, if there's a specific organization you want to refer to and speak about, we'll talk about that today. But today might be a little different than normal. But like you said earlier, we haven't really got to know each other. So I kind of look at this. This show is all about. It's all good because this show. Here's the thing. Here's the secret, everybody. This show really is Soon Young and I having a virtual cup of coffee, and you all are just stalkers watching us have a cup of coffee. So welcome to the crowd. Soon Young, tell me about your background. Let's set it up. We have an hour together. So really
Yeah, we're
start
good.
where you
We're good.
think.
My,
And I
my
love
life
your
in an
background.
hour is okay.
I love your life in an hour. I love the background. What kind of tree is that behind you?
I am currently in Michigan.
Okay.
Those are flowers from cherry trees.
Mm,
So
very
cherry season just ended here.
did it. Okay.
And I'm still celebrating May when these blossoms come out. So
I love that. I love it. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful background. So come on, tell me about you. Tell me the story.
right, okay. So English is actually my second language, so you have to forgive me. But actually, I've been here since I was 2. So, but I always tell it whenever I make grammatical errors, I say, "Listen, English is my second language." So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't have that excuse, but I make grammatical errors on a regular. So
you have to.
well, listen, I will tell you this. My favorite, I like alliteration, which is why this show is called Philanthropy in Focus with a PH instead of an F. Now people go, it could have still been alliteration if you left it with an F. I go, not in the attic, baby. PH all the way. So,
Tommy D. So I was born in Pyongyang, North Korea, and people ask about my name. You were just talking about names, and my name, Soon Yoon, was actually given to me by my grandfather during a time of turbulence and war and colonial rule, and it was a terrible time in Korea. And my name actually means peace, peace forever.
Peace forever.
And peace forever. Yeah. Does your name mean anything to me?
It just means the nonprofit sector connected. Tommy D actually translate to the nonprofit sector connected. I think no, the name Thomas I was always told means twin, and my last name Demisa, the MISA in Demisa, refers to the mass, as in in the Catholic mass back to Italy. So that's all I know about it. But the Tommy D part is really the brand that Tommy D translates to guy who's trying to make the world a better place.
We're good partners. We're good partners. You
Yeah.
have your own world, and I'm going to try to share a little of mine. So my world changed dramatically when my parents were able to flee North Korea. I was actually carried on the back of some hired people, and they walked me across the 38th parallel all the way to Seoul, Korea. And it took, weeks and weeks and weeks. I was with my brother and sister crossing at nighttime because there were soldiers during the day. And can you imagine at a border, soldiers would actually turn you back? I mean, you would think that they would want to let you go if you wanted to leave the country. They turned us back 2 times.
Wow.
My brother talks about really being hungry, but local people feeding us. And of course, there are then 3 people watching 3 children crossing military zones. And
Let me interrupt you one sec. How old were you had 2 siblings with you, your brother?
yeah, they were older than I was. So I was the only one really being carried the whole time because I was a baby.
Yeah.
But they were walking, having a hard time. Yeah.
Wow. Unbelievable.
So this is the life of of many people in the world, people who are trying to get to freedoms. And in this case, trying to get to our parents. My parents were in Seoul, Korea already, and these people were helping us get from North Korea to Seoul.
Oh my
So
goodness.
in Seoul, yeah, in Seoul, we were really lucky to have parents who were well educated. And well educated in this meaning that my mom went to music school in Chicago when she was a teenager. She studied piano at the Chicago Conservatory. It was the American Conservatory of Music, which is no longer there, but at the time she was able to go there. My grandfather was quite wealthy. He was able to send his children abroad to study. And so she went to the US, came to Chicago, and then returned to Korea. My father had loved music. And so he went to Japan to study composition, and so he was a singer. And he came to my mom's birthday party and sang at her birthday party, and he fell in love with her. Now, in Korea at the time, nobody falls in love and gets married. At the time.
What do you mean? Why? What do you mean that no one falls in love and gets married in Korea? What does that mean?
Well, in the group that my parents belonged to, you arranged marriages at the time. In fact, my grandfather wasn't even supposed to see his bride before he married her. It's the way, the old so-called Confucian society used to exist. And so what my grandfather did in order to meet my grandmother before they got married, because they were young, you usually married them when they were very young, he threw a ball into her courtyard. And then he climbed over the wall in order to be able to get a peek of his bride.
Oh my goodness. How old were they when they were, you say it was arranged?
I'm guessing if he was still playing with balls,
Yeah.
he probably was in his early teens.
Wow.
I'm guessing. I don't really know a lot about him, although I'm about to discover him because I have just uncovered about 150 letters that he wrote to now I have an aunt who came to the United States as well to study medicine. And she went to the University of Michigan, got a PhD in public health in the 1920s. And these are letters that he wrote to her, which she preserved and which I'm now having translated, etc. So the point is education. Education in our family was always the wealth that you could carry across the 38th parallel. Just imagine families leaving and discovering and realizing that the education that they got was the only thing they could carry with them.
Wow. I remember when I went to all boys private high school here on Long Island. And then at the time when I was getting out of high school, I'd already started working in restaurants and bars. So when I did get out of high school, I was a bartender and I was going to college at the time. And to be very honest with you, I wasn't as focused on my studies because I was making money and putting money in my pocket. And there's a lot, there's other things to focus on when you're working in the bar business. And sometimes you get off track of your studies. And my mother would say to me, and I will tell you, the day I did graduate from college, SUNY Old Westbury out here on Long Island, I had the cap, the cap and gown. I had written in masking tape on the cap for my mommy at 22, 23 years old, because I got to tell you, she had said to me, just get it. They can't take it away from you once you get it. And that's what I'm hearing you say is that education. Now I want to put a kind of like an asterisk to that too. Education can be, and this just came up when I was at the Met game with some friends yesterday. Education doesn't always have to be, Soon Young, right? Formal education, college and things like that. I mean, I'm still to this day, my wife can't get over how much YouTube I actually watch. And I'm watching so much YouTube because you can learn so many. You can learn so much. It's incredible. And I love to read. However, I would say I'm not the quickest reader. So I love to listen, and I love Audible and I love YouTube because it's all there for us. And, I'm working through something with, there's this psychotherapist called Phil Stutz, and I've been working through some of his stuff. He's got this thing called The Tools. I don't think we have time to get into it today, but I'm just saying there's so much, everything's there. There's all access. Back to my mom, she would just say, just get it. And I had an uncle who just get the sheepskin. He called it the sheepskin. Just get the freaking degree, Tommy D. Just get the thing. And then you can do, because I know this to this day, like folks who do want to be in the business world, not working for themselves like I do, but working in a system somewhere, they're gonna
Yeah.
look. And if you don't have it, you're gonna hit, maybe not as much anymore, but I think historically you're gonna hit kind of the top, and you're gonna go, that's kind of it. You can't get any further because you didn't get the thing. But what I was gonna say was education, in my opinion, we need so many people in the trades. So whether you want to be an electrician and get and learn that trade and that craft, or a carpenter,
Yeah.
or different things, right? I was at the event I mentioned, and we'll go to a break shortly. But the event I mentioned at one of the Met games this week was with Jovia, which is a federal credit union here on Long Island, and they brought up us nonprofit folks. Again, me as a business guy, and then but I am the nonprofit sector connector, so I guess I fit in there. One of my friends, Beth Buckheister, who's been on the show, founded an organization called Career Day Inc. in memory of her husband Ari, who tragically was murdered. With the yeah, just a terrible story. But they took the Ari's memory, who was a guy who would just say, just do something, get something going, and I never met Ari, but best point of the whole thing was to give people an opportunity. So we go into schools, and maybe soon young, maybe one day you come out here to Long Island and be, one of the speakers, right? But what I was going to say was Beth wanted to make sure that there's a scholarship that's given. She wanted to make sure that the scholarship wasn't just given for somebody to say, hey, if you're going to go to a 4-year, if you're going to go to a 2-year, but if you want to go to a trade school. My point is, I'm riffing on this education thing because I think it's an important point, is that, gang, not everybody needs to go. Okay, this might be, I might be turning people on their ear right now, but not everybody needs to go to a 4-year institution. Someone was just telling me, we played golf yesterday. His son got a full ride to go to school. It was one of the other guys, not my foursome, one of the other foursomes, and he said, I think it was $360,000 that the young man got the tuition and everything covered, but that's what it would have cost him. So that's roughly $90,000 a year for 4 years. Gang, that's not for everybody. Not everybody has to do that. This young man got the full ride, whatever. But my point is, maybe you want to work with your hands. I know great electricians who own companies and are very successful. I know great plumbers, right? So anyway, go ahead.
Tommy, I'm going to interrupt you and say that is true for life skills, for what the society needs, what you may need. But imagine what would happen if college education, a PhD, was free.
Wow.
Whole different story, right?
Well, I want to ask you about that when we come back. Let's keep them on the cliffhanger. You set it up. When we come back, what would happen? There's a new show. What would happen if a PhD was free? That's a great question, because a lot of people who can't access the education, maybe. All right, Tommy, you said you were going to tease everybody, and now you're answering your own question. When we come back soon, young, you're going to tell me about that. This show is Philanthropy and Focus. We'll be right back.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business, or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening
listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
Join me in the attic of the static. We are here with Yoon. And Yoon, I want to go back to something we were saying right before the break and think in terms of, my stance on this whole education or higher education thing is really, I feel like folks are told we all have to go down this same path. And that's the part of it that I'm trying to disrupt a bit with that conversation, because a lot of folks who would have gone in a different direction feel like they need to. I got to go to college. That's the next step. My point was it's not always the next step for everybody. So I want to go into this because I know education is critically important, and it's something that's kind of like you said, one of the tenets that you can keep with you. And I riffed about my mom and the whole thing about me going to finally graduating from college with a degree in finance. So let's talk about that. You said, what if a PhD was free? What do you mean by that?
Well, in Europe, I have a former intern who ended up in Paris, not because she spoke French well, because it was cheaper, even if she had to pay for housing. I have friends whose children are in Berlin, even though they don't speak German, because it's cheaper. European high education is much cheaper than the United States. And as a result, you have more choices. I mean, ultimately, freedoms, which I think are really important, are about choices. So if you choose that you really want to stay in school longer and that you really want to have that degree for whatever reason, one of the advantages for women is that it gives you a kind of it gives you a title.
Yeah.
Gives you a title. You walk, when I worked for UNICEF, I was given 8 years seniority or something like that, simply because I had my PhD, because they assumed I had studied the subject. They assumed that I was qualified in a way that someone with a certain number of years of experience was qualified. If you have your PhD, you can actually teach at universities. You can teach in high school. It gives you a kind of license. So if for women who are often not taken as seriously, who are sometimes overqualified for their jobs, it gives them the confidence to walk into a room of men, which I've often been in, and they look at you and they don't say, "Oh, this is the secretary," or "This is the person who's getting us coffee." This is Dr. Yoon. So there are some advantages to that license, like there is a law degree. Our daughter is a lawyer, and we told her, "You don't have to practice law, but that JD after your name is going to give you a license to enter into." In fact, many nonprofits really love lawyers.
Yes.
Because the way you think. So I'm not saying they're trivial. These things are educational trivia, but they do train you. Like with your PhD, you have to think about a single subject for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Right? In depth. So you become less tolerant of quick ideas of trivia. And for law, you learn to think a certain way in detail in language, I think, which gives you skills. So if you choose that, then you ought to be given that freedom.
Sure. Yeah.
If you choose not to do that, but to be a tradesperson, electricians are really smart.
Right. Yeah.
Really smart people. They need to make a living, and some of them become really, really special in your life. I mean, they save you.
Yeah.
If you have a natural disaster, the first thing you think about is electricity. So these people are essential, but you want the freedom to be able to choose one or the other. That's my point.
I love that. So I want to ask you kind of a challenging question, because I wonder now, when you pose a question like, what if a PhD was free, more people, I think the point is more people would go after it and access it, right?
Yeah.
So then the question is, why, I want to ask, when you mentioned Europe and you mentioned how it's less expensive to go to school in Europe, without making a big commentary against government and whatnot, I'm curious, do you have an understanding of why they do it over there differently and why here it costs, as I just made up the math on that one example, 90.
Tommy, I have no trouble making big comments against
Let's go
government.
then.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Like, why not? Why not? The reason they're cheaper is because government's helping pay for them. But there are some schools in the United States which have their own way of doing it. And I think more schools need to think about this. Bloomberg just gave millions and millions of dollars to Johns Hopkins for free medical education. Amazing, right? So if that is the American way of doing it, Wellesley, our daughter went to Wellesley. They have an endowment which allows basically guaranteed financial help to anyone who qualifies to get admissions. Could be a combination of work and study, but they have an endowment which does that. So I think we have to imagine ways which are appropriate for the United States, even where we can offer our young people that kind of freedom. What can I say?
Yeah, I love that, Bill. You continue to go back to that word freedom. That's a common, the thread that's going to go through this conversation, already has. I appreciate that. It's so interesting. Like, as an adult now, I'm more, as I mentioned, YouTube and listening things on Audible, right, and attending workshops and classes. At least for me as an individual at 18, 19, 20, I was not interested as I am at 46, 45, 44, the last handful of years. So lifelong learning. In fact, I have this bracelet from something we did last week called the Unconference, and it says "Never Stop Learning" on it. And
there you are.
And I have it facing like the direction of, so when I can look down and read it, not like facing out, but facing in, because I think that's a great reminder. We can continue to learn, and it's just so, when I hear my children say, "Oh, I don't want to go to school. It's boring." I'm like, "Oh man, well, we got to find what's not boring for you there." Like, how do we? Because I think I never get bored when I'm plugged into the stuff I want to be plugged into. I get bored when I'm into things that are boring to me. You know what I'm saying? So, like, how do we find things that, and maybe you can speak to that from.
Tommy, I am assuming your kids are very bright.
I think they're bright. Yes. Thank you.
I'm imagining they're very bright. So, unfortunately, from what I'm hearing about school systems is that they're not tailored to different levels. So, like, one child may be great in math and terrible in verbal skills, English. Some children may be great in the arts and music and terrible in math. But our school systems makes everybody at the same level. And that's because we don't put the resources, government again, we don't put resources into our schools, particularly our public schools, to be able to give that kind of individual attention. A child in the 8th grade cannot do 12th grade math. That's the way the systems are designed. Because there are too many students per teacher, and there are not enough skilled teachers per student. So I think, if we had to redo the educational systems for our kids, it's not just a matter of making it entertaining. It's not a matter of making it easy. It's a matter of meeting them where they need to be. 100%. And I say that because there's my Botswana friend. My Botswana friend, Unity Dow, has created a school in Gaborone, actually outside of Gaborone, in which she, in fact, has created a high school similar to the one you're talking about, where you can learn a trade after you get your high school degree.
Yeah. Here's what I'm hearing when you say that. And I don't want to be like, the negative guy and things like that. However, as I understand it, and I'll Google it when we go to break, but I think it was like Rockefellers. I think it was Rockefeller who was part of setting up the school system the way it was and the way it is. And what I understand about it historically is that this was not necessarily set up for individuals to have their own track and do their things. It was set up because we need workers. We need you to sit in a chair. We need you to respond to a bell, because when you're 19 and 20 and 21, I want you in the factory. Right. And then now this is outdated, but that's how I understand how it was set up. It wasn't so people could stand out and be flashy. I tell you the truth, man. I was really good. I didn't get out of my chair, whatever, in school. I was respectful and things like that. But as an adult, if I'm in a boardroom meeting and we're there for like more than 45 minutes, I'm standing up and I'm gonna lean on the wall, and because yes, I've uncovered that I have this quote unquote beautiful brain. Shout out to Joe Futterman, my coach, who I hang out with. I love her. But this ADHD beautiful brain, it's great. But like, you know what? Most of our brains are not made to be put in a box and sit in a seat and do the thing the way, I don't know, Sun Young, Dr. Yoon, I don't know what normal actually is. I don't think there's such a thing. So when we try to treat everybody the same, and that probably say we got 20 kids in a class, right? Maybe
How can you do that?
what's
Yeah.
that?
How can you focus on the talents of one or the other? Everyone is born with a talent.
100%. And I think and that's why I say to one of my children specifically, I'm like, look, you're incredibly talented. We got to get you through this system. But I want to pour into this. I don't talk who's who. I want to pour into this child and say, hey, listen, let's get you the stuff you need because you're super creative and you want to do these awesome things. Let's live there. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think it's fair to let somebody not get a high school education diploma. We got to get you through that. We just have to. Like, that's not fair. You can't do that. I can't let you out of 15. It's not, it's not 1968. We can't. I got to get you. However, if you're gonna go, and you see now with the way the internet is and the way young people create businesses and create nonprofit organizations. Last week on this show, Dylan Zajac from Computers for People created a nonprofit that has put 3,000 computers in the hands of people who need them. And he's 21 years old. He founded the organization when he was 15, Dr. Yoon. I mean, like, people are changing the world. You don't need to necessarily do it the way everybody is. But in my case, I'm saying find whatever, my opinion, and see, I want to hear you before we go to break on this one. Find whatever charges that individual up and get them in that flow state as much as possible. That's how I feel. What do you think about that?
I think that's a teacher's job. A
Yeah.
teacher's job is to find that talent in every student. And within the constraints of, if you have 50 people in a class, I used to teach university, I had 100, 200 people in my lecture. If they would come up to me and talk to me, I would spend time and maybe sometimes even intuitively try to find out what their talent is, because we all have one.
100%.
We all have one. And so I think that's a teacher's job.
Yeah.
And that would be great if we thought about teaching more like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to all the teachers, by the way. Teachers are like the coolest people in the world doing great work. I mean, I know some incredible teachers, and I know when somebody is very successful, they go, I want to thank Miss Graham, my fourth grade teacher, because whatever she did in that time or whatever, I really, Dr. Yoon really helped me when I was, in her program. And like, that's the stuff that like teachers change the future and trajectory of people. So shout out to the teachers, right, Dr. Yoon?
In Korea, I went with, he was a former ambassador to the UN, Dr. Ko. I went with him to his native home, which was in Jeju Island. And the first visit he wanted to make with his students was to his primary school teacher.
Wow.
And he cried when they met, because exactly as you say, there are people in your lives who change your life, but they don't always know they do that. And what's beautiful about that meeting is that here was a former ambassador to the UN going back and telling his primary school teacher, it was because of you. So Tommy, this leads me to an interesting discussion I always have with my husband. When we're together and he meets new people, he often asks, who is the most influential person in your life?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. Sometimes it is a teacher. And the unfortunate part of that teacher-student relationship is that teachers rarely learn that what they said to that student
was so impactful.
Gave that person the confidence to do something. And I have to tell you, I was in Toledo, Ohio we have this campaign, which I have to mention to you, called Cities. Do you want to do it now or later?
I want to do it when we come back. What is it? Cities for? You cut out a little bit.
CDAO.
Okay. So when we come back, we're going to jump into that. But I love that question, and it's something to ponder, gang. Because here's the thing. Life is short. I say it all the time, right? Think about when you're listening. A lot of people listen to the show. They find it today. They'll find it in 6 months or a year. Who is that person that's made that ultimate impact in your life and changed the trajectory of your life? Look them up. find them, call them up, show up at their house. This just happened in the last 40 minutes. I was moving my cars around out front. We're dropping kids at camp. And this woman from around the block who we met one day, and I didn't even remember. She's an older woman. I didn't remember meeting her, but she told me a story that I had said to her, and she was checking in on me about something. And I said, you know what? I know you're right here. What house is it? I'm going to meet her for a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, because something I said impacted her, and the fact that she remembered that 3 years later, it's impactful for her. Find that person who made an impact in your life and say thank you. Gratitude is so great. Say thank you. Let's go to a quick break. Dr. Yoon, and your boy, the one and only nonprofit sector connector. Right back.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy and Phocus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
That's right. Every single Friday morning, it's a different story, a different nonprofit, a different leader, a different impact, right? But at the end of the day, it's all about making the world a better place. And I was showing, if you're only on the listening front right now and you're not watching, I want you to go to www.soon-young.life, soon-young.life, and you'll see Citizen of the World, Soon Young in the United Nations, some of which we'll get into right now. But there's this campaign you want to talk about as well. This is the problem with my show, or I'll call it a challenge. A challenge sounds more positive. We always run out of time. We never run out of stories and things to say. So I'm going to do 5,000 episodes of this show. Soon Young, we're about to launch a TV show that I'm going to do out here on Long Island. So there's just more opportunities to tell these stories, and who knows where it goes from here. Glad you're here with me. Let's get back into it. So I want to hear about what kind of the campaign you're talking about, and then also the work you're doing with in conjunction with the United Nations, please.
Well, we were talking about how interconnected we are. That when you say something to someone else, particularly if you're a teacher, or say in your case, you're bringing people who are interesting and having a discussion with you, and you're able to express your approval or disapproval of certain things. You don't know how that affects others, and it is so interconnected, and yet we never really know, as teachers, for example, or as speakers, what that impact is. So I was telling you that I was in Toledo, Ohio, with this campaign. The campaign we started in 2014. When I was chair of a group called the NGO Committee on the Status of Women in New York, we organize women's organizations around the UN every March. It is the largest gathering of feminist and women's leaders. I say feminist because it includes men and boys. Mm-hmm. in the UN system, and we meet every year. So when I was chair of the NGO part of that, we started this campaign that was actually inspired by San Francisco in 1998. They adopted a UN Human Rights Treaty for Women called CEDAW, CEDAW. That's the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. They adopted this as a city ordinance, made it into law. And why did they do that? They did that because they had no hopes that Senate was going to ratify this. 189 countries have ratified this, but the United States has not. And so San Francisco said, look, we'll just do it as a city law, and that way we'll be able to take a look at our budgeting, we'll take a look at the gender balance of all of our commissions, we'll look at the hiring practices, we'll get more women into transportation, infrastructure, police department, fire department, and all of that. Mm-hmm. So that is our campaign that we asked the Mayor Lee then in 2014 to be the so-called peer leader of mayors in the US. He had a US Conference of Mayors meeting in San Francisco. He introduced a resolution, 200 mayors in the United States signed and agreed that a UN Human Rights Treaty for women was important for cities.
That's incredible.
Want to hear the big news?
I do want to hear the big news, but I have to be the one who's going to say, you know, isn't it interesting that it has to happen grassroots in cities and the federal government wouldn't, you know, bring this up and into play, right? So, well,
actually, the Obama administration had testimonies on this. Biden actually had it on his list as well. We'll see what happens with it. Sure. But the good news, with no money from the UN, with no money from our committee, the women's groups took it back home. And 10 years later, this is our 10th anniversary, we have 65 cities, counties, and states that have done the same thing. There are resolutions in some cases, declarations. That includes LA County. Okay. That includes Logan, I believe our techie here is from Pittsburgh.
Yes, yes.
It includes Pittsburgh. It includes Toledo, Ohio.
And that's where you are now, right?
No, that's where I was a few months ago when I was telling you the story that Toledo, Ohio did this ordinance, and I was just back there before in the beginning of July talking to the Women's Business Council. Mm-hmm. And the person who was moderating our panel stood up and told the crowd, you know, Sun Young was here. She calls me Sun Young, which you can too.
And then I started calling you Dr. Yoon. If my mother was listening to this show, she would say, Thomas, the woman is a doctor. Refer to her. But we started this Sun Young and Tommy D thing, and that's where it ended up. So
it's okay, it's all right. So Sun Young. So she told the group that when she first met me, she had this idea that she wanted to start a women's business, bottling wine and putting it in nice packages in Toledo, Ohio. Okay. And she was talking to me, and I looked at her. I saw a very determined look in her eye. I saw a woman who was very articulate, very smart, and I said, you can do this. So what she did, she told the crowd that because I said this to her, she went home and said to her husband, this Dr. Yoon, who is at the UN, thinks I can do this. And so she bought a building, she started a business, and just because we were talking about this, I have to show you what she's done. Like, you can't see it.
With the background, what is it?
Beautifully. No, she has started a business.
What's the name of her company? Let's give her a shout out.
I wish I could, but I don't remember it offhand.
Oh my God.
In any case, we're not supposed to be doing commercials here.
Yeah, but it's my show. I do whatever I want.
Anyways, I'm gonna send it to you if you don't mind. But I want you to know that there is this wine bottling business in Toledo, Ohio, doing beautiful things, and I'm proud of her. But it was just something that I said. So when I did this TEDx talk at the University of Michigan, same thing happened. I was told that there was this couple waiting for me to see me, and it was almost an hour because I had other things to do, and I was doing some kind of interview. And when I met them, they said, "We were your students at the University of Michigan Residential College." I said, "Great, I'm so glad to meet you again." And they said, "We became teachers because of you."
Oh, goodness. What is the ripple? What is the ripple effect, right? So they became teachers. So now they're on the front lines educating the future of this planet. And that's a result of something that you said.
I said, probably on the importance of education. And not only that, they got married because they met in my class. So
I love that. I love it. How special is that? I mean, these are the stories. I love it because you know what you talked about. We'll go to another quick break because I took too long on the last one. But the interconnected nature of everything. We are all interconnected, and that's what this is, gang. Don't try to be, and the fact that we look at this as, I can't believe this, but I'm going to quote a Beastie Boys song. But there's only one race of humans. It's the human race, gang. Enough. We look different. We might practice things differently. It's one race of humans. I can't solve all the world's problems, but I think love and compassion. The four boys from Liverpool told us all you need is love. God, man, just hug people, love people, be compassionate, find ways. We have so much more in common than we don't have in common. We have so much more in common than we don't have in common. Think about that. We're going to a quick break. Right back.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Bronku, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy and Phocus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
Join me in the attic every Friday morning. Philanthropy and Focus. Dr. Yoon is here with me today. We're going to be Dr. Yoon for the rest of the show. We're going that direction. All right. So Dr. Yoon, I want to understand, you've been involved with as the representative of International Alliance of Women to the UN, right? You have this background in connecting with all these different NGOs and things like that, different non-governmental organizations, nonprofits, et cetera. What are you up to now? How can we help? How can we support some of the efforts you're doing? That's really, at this point in the show, that's what we'd like to get to. So let's talk about some of that.
It's connected, oddly enough, to something I was watching on CNN this morning, which was the arrival of 3 people from Russia. And the message there is that we really need our friends abroad. How many countries were involved to be able to do this? Germany, Slovenia. We know the former ambassador to Russia from Slovenia. These countries had to come together. And what I really think it reminds us of is is the interconnectedness we were talking about and why we need a really strong United Nations. So in addition to this International Alliance of Women, I belong to this thing called the Coalition for the UN We Need. And we are involved in trying to envision a UN for future generations, which includes digital compact, which includes a youth generation declaration, which includes rethinking how we work with the Security Council, with the General Assembly. It's right here in New York City. So I would urge people to learn more about the United Nations in New York City. Taking a tour is a great way to do it. We need citizen support for the United Nations because of this interconnectedness that we are all aware of this morning. And so that is what I would urge us to do. On the women's issue, the United Nations is decades ahead of the rest of the world, including the United States, on women's rights. Secretary Generals are out there advocating for women's rights forever and ever. We created a Commission on Women in 1947 at the United Nations. So I would say let's learn also from the United Nations what we can do better at home, because it is learning from a huge community of international thinkers, actors, advocates, and it is something that I think that everyone in the United States needs to do, because what I have discovered in working in very small countries like Botswana, or even living in Korea, is that these countries watch what happens in the United States. They watch what happens with the UN. So I always say when the United States coughs, the rest of the world shakes. And that's because of the size of the United States economy, its political strength. But the people, the normal citizens of the United States, don't realize how much what they do is watched by the rest of the world. And so it is our responsibility, I think, to do it better. And that includes for women's rights. So that's why our campaign, the Cities for CEDAW campaign I was mentioning before, is focused on the United States, because we know that the rest of the world is watching what the women's and feminists and men are doing in the United States on this issue. And we know that it's going to have an effect. In fact, someone from Nigeria just sent me pictures of what she wants to do with her country in Abuja, her capital, on the Cities for CEDAW campaign. And so I think this global consciousness, being a global citizen, is something that most people in the world actually have. They have this consciousness that we are connected. But powerful countries like America, or even the Brits, quite frankly, sometimes the Canadians, don't realize how important that consciousness is for our survival. And I will bring up climate change.
Yeah.
Climate change is just an example of what happens in Brazil. Tropical forests is going to affect what's happening in California. What's happening here is going to drown a few islands in the Pacific tomorrow. You know, certain countries in the Pacific are already leaving as climate refugees because the sea is rising and their islands are sinking. So I would say let's develop and inform ourselves better about what the UN is doing on climate change. My former organization, the Women's Environment and Development Organization, I say former only because I just left as chair of the board. We organize women's groups around the climate negotiations, where governments have to get together and decide what their targets are and what their commitments are. All of these things are things which we should be teaching in schools.
Yeah.
We are not. And I would be delighted, Tommy D,
Yes.
if you brought more NGOs on board who are interested in climate. Youth groups are really into this climate agenda. I think it'd be great if you promoted them.
You mean on my show?
On your show.
Okay. You represent, I believe it's the 173rd episode of the show. My intention is to do 5,000 episodes of the show. So as many NGOs that you want to connect me with to bring them on the show will come on the show. That's it. You know, they're making impact. They're doing the real work that needs to be done. I did, as you were speaking, I was having this whole thing about, you know, why is it, you know, it's one thing to be patriotic. it's how do we get patriotic about a planet? How do we get patriotic about a race of people on a planet? And when I use that word race, like I used in the last segment, the human race, right? Like that's the thing. We're all interconnected. And to your point, decisions that are made in one part of this planet are going to affect other places. It is what it is, right? The polar ice caps melt, the water sea level rises, it affects things, right? This is just real stuff, you know. I am going to ask you a couple things. I would love if I could come to the UN one day and take a tour, and if maybe you could be my escort there around the UN. I would love to plug into some of the community you have around these NGOs, right? Specifically as it is connected to the UN. And I mean that wholeheartedly. Whoever you connect me with, we get them on the show. Dr. Yoon, that's it. This show is my platform to bring the good word. And I know this much. As we talked about, people impact people. I know, and this is pretty exciting, there are people on this planet that are hearing this program and other episodes of the show that I most likely will never meet, but for some way, shape, or form, they've come across this, and now they've come across this information with you or Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds, who'll be on the show next week, or Dylan Zajac from Computers for People, who was on the show last week. And that's what it is. And I know the ripple effect of that is I will argue this forever. It is infinite. The ripple effect is infinite, because if I connect a message to people and then they take that message and connect it with other people, that goes on forever. Dr. Yoon, final word from you before we head out.
Well, just a reminder that my friends from Switzerland and Germany actually probably tuned in today because it was on LinkedIn, which is a great thing. But continue the work you're doing, Tommy D. We'll give you an honorary doctoral degree.
Yes, love it. Dr.
D sounds pretty good. For the tour of the UN, let me know. But I really would love you to connect with some of the youth groups, young women's groups. We have a YP group at the NGO CSW New York that meets, and you should think about March when the CSW in New York City.
It's in New York City. Do we have the dates on that yet?
You do. You have to go to the website to get to next year's dates. I will be there. All of our group will be there. We'll be 7,000 or 8,000 people.
All right, you and I are connected now. As it comes closer to March, we'll talk November, December about the dates and whatnot. And we'll get people out there. PH Tommy D. I don't know. What are we gonna do? All right, listen, Dr. Yoon, I appreciate you. I appreciate Michelle. If you're out there listening, thanks for making the connection, because none of this happens without us looking out for each other, making connections. Look forward to a whole series of NGOs connected to the UN coming on Philanthropy and Focus. Make it a great day, everybody. I'll see you next Friday. Thanks again. Bye now.
Bye, Dr. D.
Connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
You're listening to Talk Radio